The video is in German, okay, with subtitles, but I think you might find this very interesting. So, want to hit that, guys? Make sure you can.
Bruker du Ansgar? Ja, det er deg, ja. Ja, så bra. Ok. Ja, hei du. Hei du. Ja. Ja, hva gjør du? Ja, det er denne her. Ja, vil du sitte? Takk. Ja. Ja. Ja, så den, ja, du kom noen ting hele formiddagen? Nei, jeg beklager at jeg kan på legge om til et helt lyst, selv om da skal alle ha hjelp på en gang. Ja. Så du kom ikke inn i den, eller? Nei, men ligger der. Ok, har du forsøkt å åpne den? Åpne den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel? Nei. Du har det på en hånd? Nei, ja, det skal være fort gjort. Ja, vi ser. Du bare gjør der. Sånn. Ja, da er vi i gang. Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også. Ok. Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre. Ja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner, inni her, så ligger det kanskje flere 100 sider med lagret tekst. Så kommer vi videre, så tar du tak i et ark, på den måten her, og så blar du over på neste side av den, fortsetter teksten der. Jeg blar, altså. Du blar, ja. Men jeg skal tilbake da. Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen, tar tak der, og så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde sagt. Ok, så den slutter der, og så fortsetter den da. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte, hva må jeg gjøre da? Da bare slår du sammen permene. Ja, på den måten der. Sånn. Da er lukket der, ligger alt lagret inni der. Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her. Ja, alt blir lagret inni her. Ja, i tilfelle setter fyr på, eller ja, det er kanskje litt sannsynlig. Ja, ok. Nei, for det er noe med det, for eksempel, når du har holdt på med skriftruller, så tar det litt tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja. Ja. Ja, men jeg vil før det går. Jeg må bare gå inn en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner sånn, og så, hva du kaller det? Blar. Jeg blar. Ja, blar videre. Blar frem og tilbake, og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den. Flott, kjempefint. Ja, men ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjennom, for jeg ikke åpnet den. Jeg ikke åpnet den. Fra hver side. Nå må dere åpne fra andre siden. Så det er ikke likegyldig, det her. Åpne fra den siden der, sånn. Der. Der nå. Ja vel.
Anybody ever have an experience like that? I just, kind of imagine what it must have been like for people when they first got the book. How does this work? It's upside down again. Can I get one with pictures? What's interesting to me about this, not only that it's kind of like us and the computer and this whole change, is that the book was a huge, not just the book itself, but the invention of the printing press, which was right around this time. Because before this time, most people couldn't read. In fact, I think around the time of Jesus, when scrolls were what you used, like 90% of the people were illiterate. They didn't know how to read. And so you got your information from other people telling you or reading it to you. And when he mentioned the printing press, everything changed. In fact, the Reformation, that there was, Martin Luther is often who we think of as leading this, was really centered in the fact that everyone had access to print. People began to be able, more and more people could read, and you had access to books and pamphlets, and you could publish things. In fact, the Reformation wouldn't have happened without the printing press. And it's interesting to think about what a huge change that is. The invention of the printing press is where we kind of hit what we call modernity. Anybody ever heard the word modernity? It comes from the word modern, right? Everything that's modern. And before that, you had a whole different kind of culture. In fact, let's see. We have this little another little clip we can bring up, guys. You have that? I'm just going to keep this in the background for a second here. All right. If you've been to like a cathedral or a really nice church building, what are these that you see? Stained glass. What's the purpose of stained glass?
It tells a story.
It tells a story. What's this right here? Anybody know? There's Jesus praying in the garden. How about this? Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus. This is Jesus in the temple when he's 12, talking with the elders. This is with like the good shepherd, see the sheep, and the watery. So you have all these stories that were told in stained glass. Now, I didn't pull this down, but have you ever been to a gathering? Let's actually skip past this, because otherwise we'll get distracted, because it's a great story. You notice how we all watch? You know, I can talk all I want over here. You're going to watch this because this is what's going on, right? And it's the way it works. If you've ever been to like a cathedral, you see those stained glass, and it's designed to tell the story that people didn't read, and so they learned the story through those images. We were very visual people. You also went to worship, they use other things like incense. Have you ever smelled incense? Right? And it was kind of symbolic of prayers rising to God, but it was something that how do you experience incense? You smell it, right? You can smell it. You can also see the smoke rising, right? Up at our table here, we have things that we can experience. We have the rocks to pray with. We have the labyrinth that you can trace your finger. Most cathedrals would have a labyrinth on the floor that you would walk. And so it's a very physical thing. You would actually be moving and experiencing God's presence in prayer. The stones you would touch, candles that you would light, you could feel the heat. Everything was designed as an experience. And it was all about stories and the senses. It wasn't just a head thing. It was, although that was important, it was also a deep down thing. What happened with the invention of the printing press and what we call modernity is, well, it made a huge change in the church, and ideas got out. Before this, we had what was called Christendom, when the church was really in charge of everything. That nothing happened that wasn't centered in the church. I mean, emperors would have to cross mountains to get the church's approval before they would do things. And that's what had happened. The church had control over everything was printed. The monks copied things, so they were in charge. When you mentioned the printing press and modernity, the church became less central, right? But until that time, worship and experience of God was very mystical and connected to all our senses and all of us. With word becoming associated with print, we began to have things like this. You know what this is? This is a hymnal. It's got hymns in it. Ain't like that. There's songs. Oh, we're not quite there yet, guys. And if you ever look through hymns, a lot of hymns are not songs that repeat phrases to meditate. They're very deep theological tracts, actually. You can't really sing a hymn and appreciate it at the same time. You have to stop, read it through, think about it. From the time of modernity in about the 1500s with the printing press, basically everything was centered in logical, linear arguments. It was all about what you did with your brain, not about your heart or your experience or your body. It was all about what's up here and what's logical and straightforward. And the church really embraced that. Now, over time, because of this change, like I said, the church became less central. Now it was all intellectual and thought. The church didn't have control over that. Other people could put out their own thoughts there and question things. But then came another switch, which began to happen about the middle of the last century. Around 1950, we hit the end of Christendom, even though we didn't know it, and the beginning of what we now call postmodernity, which means after that which is modern. Right? And I want to show a clip to begin to kind of talk about that, if we can bring that up.
Where's the sound?
What are you? I read your book.
Here we go.
Would you like me to quote you? Ironically, the thing that people are most hungry for, meaning, is the one thing that science hasn't been able to give them.
Yeah.
Come on. It's like you're saying that science killed God. What if science simply revealed that he never existed in the first place?
I think we're going to need to get some air.
What?
And a few more of these.
Thank you. Whew. A little chilly out here.
Yeah, this is nice.
I got one for you.
What do you got?
Occam's Razor. You've ever heard of it?
Occam's Razor. It sounds like some slasher movie.
No, Occam's Razor. It's a basic scientific principle. And it says, all things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the right one.
Makes sense to me.
So what's more likely? Thank you.
You're welcome.
An all-powerful, mysterious God created the universe and then decided not to give any proof of his existence. Or that he simply doesn't exist at all, and that we created him so we wouldn't have to feel so small and alone.
I don't know.
couldn't imagine living in a world where God didn't exist. No. I wouldn't want to.
How do you know you're not deluding yourself? I mean, for me, I need proof.
Proof. Did you love your father?
What?
Your dad, did you love him?
Yes, very much.
Prove it.
Right, who knows what movie that was from?
Contact.
Contact. We've seen the scene actually before, but I brought it up for a different reason. Jodie Foster is kind of the main character in the movie Contact. She doesn't believe in God, and she's searching for life beyond our world, which has been like the center of her life since she was a kid. And the other character, played by Matthew McConaughey, is kind of the spiritual figure in the story, and for whom God is a deeply personal experience of God's presence that's kind of directed at all of his life. And the two have this connection, yet they have this great difference, and they're struggling with it. So when they meet, she raises up, you've written this book, right, about God. It makes it sound like, like God, that science killed God, that science can't give you meaning that only God can. And she said, but what if science has just shown that God is really dead? God never existed to begin with. So he says, well, let's talk about this. And she says, I need to have proof, though, right? Occam's razor, it's actually a philosophical principle, not a scientific one, that simple is better. She says, I need proof. Show me proof that God exists. So what does he ask her? Did you love your dad? Did you love him? Now, she's expecting what kind of discussion here? Well, maybe theological or intellectual. We're going to talk about proofs. We need proofs of whether God is there or not. So we want to talk about science and how do we know the universe has to show somehow that God is there. But instead he says, your dad, did you love him? She's put off, she isn't quite sure what to do with it, but she answers what? Yeah. She says, very much. And he says what? Prove it. Prove it. The place she's coming from is where modernism has been centered. It's been a very, what we call dualistic. There's this and that. They're separate things, and they never enter each other. We have sacred, and we have what? Secular, right? The separation of church and state. These are separate things. They don't come together. From the beginning of modernity, slowly the church has been kind of put to this side place. And maybe that's not a bad thing, especially if we're talking about institutions. But also that which is sacred and spiritual has been kind of put aside. It just goes in this one little corner. And everything has to do with proof, arguments that we can prove. This is right or this is wrong. If we can't prove it, it can't be real. So Matthew McConaughey's character, he kind of enters a different realm. He says, well, you love your father, you loved him. Prove it. Can anybody test love? I mean, how do you test love? I mean, we can talk about chemical reactions that happen, but the experience of love. I mean, can someone prove to you they love you? You say, prove it to me. Well, that doesn't really help, because if you ever had someone say, prove to me you love me, you say, you know what? If you need me to prove it, then obviously you don't understand love, right? You either know it or you don't. It's a thing that's outside of proof. You can't buy it, you can't measure it, but it's real. This is where postmodernism comes in. It's a way that our culture has changed, a different way of looking at the world. And in many ways, it can be a very helpful thing for us as the church. Well, modernity helped us to say, you know what, the church can't control things. We all need to be able to have access to the stories of what God is about and be able to wrestle with it for ourselves, which was a good thing. It's also separated us. It pulled us away from that idea that everything connects us to God, that it's not just our intellect, but our feelings, our experience, our relationships, our bodies, the things we touch that are all around us, that all of it's important. And this postmodern world that we've entered has said, you know what, those things are important too. And we can ask questions. We're not locked into it has to be this way or that way.